This video is going to cover how to create an architecture presentation board in Illustrator. I like to start with inspiration. So if you go on Pinterest, search for architecture presentation boards, look up board design. Anything that helps kind of inspire you is a good starting point. As far as these presentations are concerned, we don't want the graphics to be the kind of center of attention. We want the work to be prominently displayed. But I think it's important to have the project organized in a cohesive way, use white space in a compelling way. So it's important to set this up so that your work is the thing that is shining here. So opening Illustrator, I'm going to go to New File. And again, InDesign works well for this too. I'm just going to work in Illustrator because that's where a lot of our workflow is based. I'm going to create a tabloid landscape. So that's what this presentation calls for. This will be projected, so we're going to go with RGB color. If we were physically printing, we would go with CMYK. I'm going to set this to 300 ppi, and number of artboards, I'll set this to, say, 10. And there's other settings. So this, so number of artboards 10. We can tell it how we want this to display. I'm going to say arrange by column, so it'll just be a column of 10 artboards vertically. We'll call this 11 by 17 presentation. And I'm going to hit create document. So it gives me 10 boards. Some things that I want to do before I get started, I'm going to go to View, Rulers, Show Rulers. That'll show you the rulers at the top and on the side. I can right-click that and set that to inches if I like. I could also turn on Grid. So if I want to show the grid, go to View, Show Grid. Holding Alt and scrolling with my mouse wheel, I can zoom in. I can go to Snap to Grid too. So now when I create artwork or drop in images, they will snap to that grid that's overlaid on the project. So that can be useful when aligning images and text. So that's under View, Snap to Grid. These are guides, so if I click in my ruler space and bring down this line, just click and drag. These are guides, so I can use these to snap against as well. So if I hold Alt, I can duplicate this. If I hold Alt and then I hold Shift, it'll lock it vertically, horizontally. So that's another good tip. So when you're laying out these boards, think about alignment, think about white space is really important, right? Like, don't feel like you have to just go full bleed with everything. I think as architects, we like to maximize the work, but also think about the use of white space in the project. So this guide is continuous. If I want to select this, I can say Control-C, go to the next page, Shift-Control-V to paste it in place. And I can do that for all of these if this is a guide that I want to use for all of my boards. If you were working in InDesign, you would have a master page that you could edit, and it'll make that change for all of your boards. But in this case, we can customize it this way. All right, text font. So figure out, what strategy you want to use graphically. There's a lot of great examples out there. There's templates that you can download and pay for if you like. Otherwise, you could kind of create your own. I try to avoid using a lot of line work like this. Like, try to avoid using borders and you know, frames around images. You really want to let the white space do the actual like borders, right? Like, let the white space be the thing that defines one object from the next. So think of ways that you can do that. In terms of a font, choose something minimal. So under character here, and I like to work in Essentials Classic. This gives me a lot of options here. So under character, I'm going to choose a font that is very minimal. Lato is a good one. Any of the Swiss fonts are great. Franklin Gothic if you want something more bold for maybe a header. Another one that I use a lot, let's see. A lot of these, PFDIN Display Pro, these work really well. So let's make a header here. I'm just going to click and drag. It fills it with filler font. And let's give this a name. We'll call it Lotus Bridge. And I'm going to Control A to select all the text, increase the text size. And again, I'm just making this up. This is going to be different for each of you. And so figure out, you know, where you want the title to be. It doesn't have to be in the top left. You know, you can be creative with kind of where that is. To drop images in, I'm going to go File, Place. So the shortcut is Shift-Control-P. But what this allows me to do is drop in images from my computer, and I can drop in images. Let's see. So I'm just going to choose kind of a cover image. Let's see this. Okay, so when you click on it, it drops it in full size. I'm going to hold Shift as I scale this down to a size that makes sense. So now I have to decide, you know, how I want to lay this out with the image. I also should show some text here too. So this text will be smaller. We'll make this 18-point font. We can say overprint preview if we want to show these images at kind of full resolution. So we can fill this in with text. I'm just going to copy and paste some text from this project. And you'll notice, just like in InDesign, if there's too much text for your text box, you'll see a red box appear here. You can click on that and click again, and it's going to continue the rest of that text in a text box. And you can see it's being linked. So if I wanted to continue it on another page, for example, I could do this. Or if I wanted to continue it on the same page, I could do that. Otherwise, by clicking on this, I can click on it again and simply expand this so that all of the text fits in this original text box. Okay, so play with the size of your text boxes a little bit. I may want to increase the size of this. When you make this a PDF, we can, well, we want to crop this too. So you can select the image and go to crop image. And you can set this so that it's the size of your artboard. Since we want to go full bleed with it, hit enter. And you'll notice our title is behind the image. So I can select the image, right click, and say arrange, send to back. So now the image is in the far back, my text is in front of it. I want to clean this up a bit to avoid that. Call this our project name. And when you're putting together this presentation, think about the order of the images you want to show, right? I wouldn't show a built photo of it first. In your case, I wouldn't show a rendering that's realistic in the beginning. The first things that you want to show are your concept and maybe kind of establish the problem. Talk about the partee of your project, right? Maybe a really nice photo of your partee model, right? So in the case of this project, if I go Shift Control P and I find I have some photos of the original partee model that we did. I think these do a good job of kind of displaying the concept of the project. Okay, so this is more the kind of thing that I would see in the beginning of your presentation. And again, I'm going to crop the image. Enter. And I could go, full bleed with this. It's up to you, how many images you want to display on each board, but think about kind of the way the project is being presented. I may want to place multiple images here, so Shift Control P. Let's add another image of that partee model from a different angle. Holding Shift to scale it proportionally. And then I'm going to make these the same size. That's right, I cropped it. I'm going to turn off Snap to Grid. And crop this image. I'd spend more time making this the right size. And so lay out each board, think about, where the text is, maybe in an image like this with a black backdrop, I may want to have a black backdrop for this whole board. So make sure I have layers here. So in my layers, I'm going to create a new layer. This will be the kind of background color, and I'll just use a black box. And so now I can control the background. I'll lock this so that I don't accidentally move it. And if I wanted to add text to this page, I could set this text to be white so that it shows up in contrast with that. Think about headers too. We can, on this page, we can say partie, right? The idea here was kind of a folding plane emerging out from the ground plane. Forms a roof shell over the ADU. And so we can play with, different fonts here. Again, maybe just 2 max. We'll set this to maybe Franklin Gothic Demi Condensed. Make this a little bigger. I'm going to turn on Snap to Grid again, lay this out. And so what's nice about this working in Illustrator, graphics like arrows and things you can do in Illustrator directly. You can in other programs, but I think they're easiest to work with in Illustrator. So if you have to modify a diagram or a drawing, you can do that in Illustrator pretty easily. Okay, so talking about the concept, again, in the beginning, we really want to just show them kind of the concept, how that idea turned into a partie, how that partie translated into maybe some of the site analysis that you did, how kind of slowly reveal the design. Don't feel like you want to just kind of show it all in the beginning, because then you're forcing the juror to make an opinion and kind of express an opinion early on when you really want to walk them through your logic before you present them with the final result. Okay, so Shift Control P to drop in some diagrams. We'll show, for example, maybe in this case, we had these sketches early on that we were interested in. This is a axon of the framing. So I'll again move this to the back because it's overlaying this. So I'm going to right click, arrange, send to back. So one thing I can do here, let's say I want to create a border around this and kind of show that it's a call out from this location. I can create a rectangle. Say I want to do a rounded rectangle. I can switch these, set this to black. So my border will be black, and I have a rectangle. We'll start with that. If I want to make this rounded, you'll notice there are these grips here. I can, play with those, and that'll change the radius of our fillet. So we can have a rounded rectangle pretty easily. Or if you want to just have, for some reason, if you just want to affect one, just use the white arrow, and you can do that here. Okay, so I want all of them rounded. I'm also move this up a little bit. I'm going to make this a dashed line. So the other thing that we're going to do is go to stroke. So selecting this rounded rectangle, we're going to go to stroke. I can set this to a dashed line, and I'm going to set the size of my dash. We'll bring this down to maybe 6, increase the line weight up a bit, make this a little more bold, and we can then have a call out here. And I'll do the same thing here. So we could either do a rectangle there. At this scale, I think it makes more sense to just have kind of a leader. So we will select this. I will set the, we'll expand this so that the arrowhead, when I select that line, it gives me the option of changing the arrowhead. We can set one of the arrows, or we can just have a dot. If this is too large, we can bring down the scale of it to maybe 70%. Changing the line weight will also affect that, but we don't want to do that. We want to keep it consistent. Bring this down so this aligns. It's still snapping to our grid. Turn that off momentarily, bring that up, move this over. Okay. So I'm going to crop this image as well. Enter. All right, so I have a detail that I'm calling out in kind of an axonometric view of the structure. So as this, again, Shift Control P, we'll add some more diagrams. So this was an axon of the project. This was modeled in Revit and Rhino, brought into SketchUp to create the shadow effect that we wanted, and then brought into Illustrator to create this overlay so that we could have a heavy line weight, emphasizing the idea of this roof as a kind of shell geometry. And I'm going to crop the image. So this might be a good opportunity to use white space. So instead of going full bleed with this, actually let's do this. We'll have this kind of the larger image here, and then Shift Control P. I'm going to add some other views of this as well. Holding Control, I can place multiple objects. And these I want to be smaller. So I'm showing other views of that. So we'll make these smaller so we can have kind of a series of images instead of just one large full bleed. And I'm going to copy and paste this guide. I can select it by just selecting Control Drag, Control C, click on this board, Shift Control V or Control. There we go. And so if, let's say I want to use that as my guide, I can go to View, let's see, set that. I'm going to save this. I can tell this file's getting a little heavy, so I'm going to say File, Save As. Okay, so I'm going to show, on this particular page, I'm going to show two kind of smaller views and one larger view of this project, all with kind of the same graphic style. And I'll crop these so I can get them a little closer to each other. So I could probably fit these all over here to the right. And maybe some room here for text. Shift Control V to paste in place. Again, you can format this text appropriately. I wouldn't have this much text on any of your pages, but reduce it to what's needed. One thing you'll notice by default in both Illustrator and InDesign is it's by default going to hyphenate your text boxes. So select your text box, go to Paragraph, and uncheck Hyphenate, and it's going to get rid of all of those hyphenations. So you'll get clean text. Another thing that you can do, let's say you don't like the way that it's aligned on the left and not aligned. I can select this and go to Justify All Lines, and it'll create a nice border around my text. What it does is it changes the spacing within the text, but it gives you a nice clean border around everything. It's kind of funny here, but so yeah, you have options for when you're laying out text. Okay, you may want to maybe add some text under some of these images to give them kind of an understanding of maybe the orientation of the view. Northeast, southwest. Okay, and so we've talked about creating arrows. There's other arrow types that we like to use. So going to arrowheads. This is a really common one, this arrow 10. And it comes in pretty small, so you'll have to adjust the size of that. Maybe we'll make this 200%. But this is a really good arrow type. You can use the pen tool. If, let's say we want to angle this, I'm going to say add anchor point. Let's say we want to angle this arrow. I can select this line, bring it in like that. And let's say we want to round this. I can select this and go to Effect, Stylize, or let's see, Effect, Stylize, Round Corners, and I can set the radius for this. So if I say 0.5 inches, it'll give me an indication of what that will look like. 0.3. Okay, so if I want to have an annotation with a rounded kind of fillet edge, you can do that. If I were making this a call out, I would probably add text here and group these together. So let's do this for project, an image, Shift Control P. Add some more diagrams. We have an exploded axon. A lot of these were diagrams that I created in Illustrator and then saved as a JPEG. But you can also drop in Illustrator files, obviously, into this. So it just depends on how big of a file you want to have. I'm going to select this again, right-click, Arrange, Send to Back so that it shows up behind my arrow. I'm going to have a series of annotations here, so I will group these together. Ideally, it's always best to just have straight lines as far as annotations go. So unless you absolutely have to have an arrow, so I'm just going to create a straight line and give it an arrowhead. Set this to 200. Don't want these arrowheads to be too large, keep it minimal. We'll call this butterfly roof. Go back to this style. And I can right justify that so that it works with our leader. And I will group these together, right click, group. Now they move together. If I want to individually edit this, I can double click on it and individually move these around. Otherwise, double click out. And this could also be a good opportunity to, if you have an exploded axon like this, maybe you're not just calling this out with text, maybe you have kind of an example image that you embed in this as well. All right, so I'm going to set this to we're using PFDIN. I'm going to bring the font or bring the size down. Okay, so now I can select this. I'm going to hold Alt to duplicate it. Just drag. And then again, if I want to edit this individually, just double click, and now I can edit just this arrow to bring it onto the object. So we'll call these building modules, and I'm going to select this, grab this image or text size. Oh, this was all caps. Let's see, under character, there should be, you can go to all caps and edit the text that way. So in your presentations, when you have architectural drawings or callouts, use all caps. If you have a large paragraph, you don't have to do that, but I would say for callouts like this, all caps. All right, so to do an annotation diagram like that in Illustrator, I would follow this. And also, notice kind of the graphic style I'm using for this. I did a rendering in V-Ray. I set this to orthographic view, so it's not a perspective. Rendered this with subtle shadow, and then exported the same view with line work, and then overlaid that line work in Illustrator. Created a heavy border for the perimeter. So all of the perimeter lines have a heavier line weight. Added these dashed lines in Illustrator, representing the fact that this roof is being exploded. It's being pulled off of the object. So that's why we have dashed lines. And I'm using them to strike the corner of every module. So indicating where this roof would go if it were dropped back down on the image or back on the modules here. Okay, and so once you're done with your presentation, you're happy with it, you can go to File, Save a Copy. Okay, so first save, we're going to save our Illustrator file as is, right? And then we're going to go File, Save a Copy. Okay. Just wait for this to finish saving. It's a big file. I have a lot of high-res images in this. Still thinking. You can see its status there. Okay, so once it's done, File, Save a Copy. And we're going to save this as an Adobe PDF. Call this luminosity presentation and save. And if you want to reduce the file size, you can uncheck Preserve Illustrator Editing Capabilities and just say, because we've already saved this as an Illustrator file separately, so when we want to edit this, we can always go back into that AI file. If we want to, just use this as a presentation, I'm going to uncheck this. Okay, so it'll create a PDF with all 10 pages. If you wanted to remove any of those pages, you can go to Document Setup, Edit Artboard, and then you can select them and delete any of the artboards that you don't want or that were unused in your presentation.